Almost everyone who has struggled with persistent breakouts has gone through the same frustrating cycle. They research ingredients, switch products, simplify their routine, add new products back in, and still find themselves dealing with unexpected pimples that don't seem connected to anything obvious. One of the less discussed but genuinely common causes of this cycle is the skincare products themselves, specifically certain ingredients within those products that have a tendency to clog pores or trigger breakouts in certain skin types, often while the person using them has no idea the ingredient is even there. This isn't a simple story of a handful of universally bad ingredients that everyone should immediately eliminate. The reality is more nuanced than that, and understanding the nuance is actually more useful than a simple list of things to avoid, because the same ingredient that causes significant breakouts for one person may work perfectly fine for someone else. The reason for this comes down to how different skin types interact differently with the same ingredients, and understanding that relationship is the foundation of making smarter decisions about what goes on your skin. The concept at the center of this conversation is comedogenicity. A comedone is the clinical term for a clogged pore, the category that includes both blackheads and whiteheads, and comedogenicity refers to the tendency of a substance to cause or contribute to the formation of comedones when applied to skin. Over the decades, researchers have attempted to rate various skincare and cosmetic ingredients on a scale of comedogenicity, typically from 0 to 5, where 0 means the ingredient is considered non-comedogenic and 5 indicates a high likelihood of clogging pores. This rating system sounds straightforward, but it has significant limitations that are worth understanding before treating any comedogenicity list as a definitive guide. The original comedogenicity ratings were largely developed through testing on rabbit ears, which have a much more sensitive follicular response than human facial skin. This means that some ingredients rated as highly comedogenic in those original tests may not produce the same effect on human skin, particularly at the concentrations used in finished skincare products. Additionally, ingredients don't exist in isolation in real products. They interact with other ingredients in a formulation in ways that can either amplify or reduce their individual comedogenic potential. An ingredient rated as moderately comedogenic on its own might behave quite differently when combined with other ingredients in a specific formula, which is why the ingredient rating alone doesn't always predict how a finished product will behave on any given person's skin. Despite these limitations, comedogenicity ratings remain a useful starting point, particularly for people with oily or acne-prone skin who are trying to identify potential triggers in their routine. Among the ingredients most consistently associated with pore clogging across multiple sources and skin types, oils occupy a particularly prominent place in the conversation. Not all oils are equal in their comedogenic potential. This is a common misconception that leads some people to either avoid all oils entirely or assume all oils are safe because they've heard that oil cleansing is beneficial. The reality is that oils vary enormously in their fatty acid composition, and that composition is a major factor in determining how likely a particular oil is to contribute to clogged pores. Coconut oil is one of the most widely discussed examples, and it consistently appears near the top of comedogenicity discussions for a specific reason. Coconut oil is high in lauric acid, a fatty acid that has actually shown some antibacterial properties in research, but it is also associated with a high tendency to clog pores in people with oily or acne-prone skin. Despite being a natural ingredient and having a positive reputation in wellness culture, coconut oil is one of the most commonly flagged ingredients by dermatologists for people who are prone to breakouts, particularly on the face. This is a useful example of why natural doesn't automatically mean non-comedogenic. Some of the most pore-clogging ingredients available come directly from natural sources. Wheat germ oil is another example of a natural oil that consistently receives high comedogenicity ratings. It appears in some skincare products for its vitamin E content and antioxidant properties, but for acne-prone skin types it carries a significant risk of contributing to clogged pores. Similarly, flaxseed oil, while popular in some health-focused skincare formulations, is often rated as moderately to highly comedogenic and may not be suitable for oily or breakout-prone skin. In contrast, oils like squalane, derived from olives or sugarcane, consistently receive low comedogenicity ratings and are generally well tolerated even by oily and acne-prone skin types. Rosehip oil, hemp seed oil, and niacinamide-enriched formulations are other examples of ingredients that tend to be better tolerated across skin types, though individual variation always applies. The point isn't to memorize a list of good and bad oils, but to understand that oil type matters significantly, and the presence of oil in an ingredient list doesn't tell you much without knowing which specific oil and at what concentration. Beyond oils, certain emollients and occlusive ingredients deserve attention in this conversation. Emollients are ingredients that soften and smooth skin by filling in gaps in the skin's outer layer, and occlusives are ingredients that create a physical barrier on the skin's surface to reduce water loss. Both categories serve legitimate and important functions in skincare, but some specific ingredients within these categories are associated with pore-clogging in susceptible skin types. Isopropyl myristate is one of the most consistently flagged ingredients in this category. It's a synthetic emollient used in many skincare and cosmetic products to improve texture and spreadability, giving products a smooth, non-greasy feel on application. Despite its pleasant sensory properties, it consistently receives high comedogenicity ratings and is associated with breakouts in acne-prone skin, appearing in products ranging from moisturizers to foundations to hair products that contact the face and hairline. Isopropyl isostirate and isopropyl palmitate are closely related ingredients with similarly high comedogenicity ratings that appear in many of the same product types. Certain silicones, while generally considered non-comedogenic in their pure form, become more complicated in the context of complete formulations. Dimethicone, one of the most widely used silicones in skincare and cosmetics, is generally considered safe for most skin types and is not typically rated as comedogenic on its own. However, heavier silicone formulations used in some primers and foundations can create an occlusive effect on the skin that some people with acne-prone skin find contributes to congestion over time, particularly with regular daily use. This is an example of how ingredient behavior in isolation versus ingredient behavior in a complete formula and real-world use can diverge. Lanolin is another ingredient worth understanding in this context. Derived from sheep's wool, it is a highly effective occlusive and emollient that has been used in skincare for decades. For dry and sensitive skin types, it can be genuinely beneficial, but for people with acne-prone skin, it is associated with a moderate to high tendency to clog pores. It appears in some lip products, thick moisturizers, and healing ointments, and can be a less obvious culprit for breakouts, particularly around the mouth and chin if those products migrate to facial skin. Algae extracts and certain seaweed-derived ingredients represent a less commonly discussed category that some dermatologists flag as potentially comedogenic for susceptible individuals. These ingredients appear in products marketed around their antioxidant or mineral content, and while they aren't universally problematic, they appear in comedogenicity discussions often enough to be worth noting, particularly for people who have already eliminated more obvious potential triggers without resolving their breakout issues. Sodium lauryl sulfate, a surfactant used in many cleansers and foaming products, occupies a slightly different place in this conversation. It isn't typically classified as comedogenic in the traditional sense, but it is associated with skin barrier disruption in some people when used regularly, and a compromised skin barrier can make skin more reactive and more prone to inflammation and breakouts. This is a useful illustration of how ingredients can contribute to breakout-prone conditions through mechanisms other than direct pore clogging. Understanding which ingredients may be contributing to breakouts requires a systematic approach rather than simply eliminating everything at once. Removing all potentially comedogenic ingredients simultaneously makes it impossible to identify which specific ingredient was actually causing the problem, since if skin clears up after eliminating 10 ingredients, there's no way to know which one or which combination was responsible. The more informative approach is to introduce or eliminate one product at a time, allowing a realistic evaluation period typically 4 to 6 weeks before drawing conclusions about whether a specific product is contributing to breakouts. Patch testing, while commonly discussed, is worth doing more carefully than many people realize. Testing a new product on the inner arm is useful for identifying immediate allergic or irritant reactions, but it doesn't always predict how a product will behave when applied to facial skin over several weeks, since facial skin tends to be more sebaceous and more prone to comedone formation than arm skin. A more informative approach for comedogenicity specifically is applying the new product to a small area of facial skin, typically near the jawline or cheek, consistently for 2 to 4 weeks while keeping the rest of the routine unchanged, which gives a more accurate picture of how that product behaves on the skin that actually matters. It's also worth understanding that product formulation matters as much as individual ingredient lists. The same ingredient at 1% concentration in a lightweight serum behaves differently from that same ingredient at 10% concentration in a heavy cream. Reading ingredient lists is a useful skill, but ingredients are listed by concentration from highest to lowest, which means an ingredient that appears near the end of a long list is present at a relatively low concentration that may behave quite differently from the same ingredient appearing near the top of the list. The most practical takeaway from understanding comedogenic ingredients isn't a definitive list of things to immediately eliminate from every skincare routine. It's a framework for investigation when breakouts are persistent and unexplained despite consistent skincare habits. If someone with oily or acne-prone skin is experiencing breakouts they can't explain, looking at the ingredient lists of their current products through the lens of comedogenicity, cross-referencing against commonly flagged ingredients like coconut oil, isopropyl myristate, lanolin, and certain heavy emollients provides a structured starting point for identifying potential culprits that might otherwise be overlooked. Individual skin response ultimately remains the most reliable guide. Comedogenicity ratings are useful reference points, not absolute predictions, and the only way to know with certainty how a specific product will affect a specific person's skin is through careful systematic observation over a realistic time period, consulting a dermatologist when breakouts are persistent, severe, or significantly affecting quality of life provides access to personalized guidance that no ingredient list or general video can replicate, since a dermatologist can evaluate the full picture of someone's skin, routine, and health history in a way that makes recommendations genuinely tailored rather than broadly applicable to everyone watching the same content.